solid ground. Nations rise and fall. Kingdoms once strong, now shaken. We trust forever in your name, name of Jesus. We trust the name of Jesus. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever, forevermore. You are victorious. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever, forevermore. You are victorious. Unmatched in all your wisdom, in love and justice you will reign. Every knee will bow. We bring our expectations. Our hope is anchored in your name, name of Jesus. We trust the name of Jesus. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever, forevermore. You are victorious. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever, forevermore. You are victorious.
Hey everybody, welcome to Community Christian Church Online. I'm Adam, I'm one of the pastors here at CCC. Thanks for tuning in. I hope our time together today is the highlight of your week. It's an exciting time in the life of CCC. If you're tuning in on Sunday, then starting today, CCC is offering services on demand beginning at 7 a.m. So services are streaming at 9:15 and 11 on Sundays and Monday nights at 7. We're gathering outside in person on Sundays at 10. And services are on demand beginning at 7 a.m. Tons of options. Basically, the highlight of your week is ready whenever you are. Online, in person, on demand, CCC is all about helping people find the way back to God. Just check out communitycc.net for more information. And while you're there, you'll see that we're hosting a blood drive on October 9th. You can make an appointment to donate blood. You'll also see that later in October, we're having another corn maze night at Beachmont. Tickets for that will go on sale soon. Lots of great things going on, lots of chances to connect and take steps towards God. And you know, my hope is this time together is just what you need today. I hope it's encouraging and helpful. Thanks for tuning in.
God is able, He will never fail. He is Almighty God, greater than all we see, greater than all we ask. He has done great things, lifted up, He defeated the grave, raised to life. His name we overcome, for the Lord our God is able. God is with grave, raised to life. Our God is able. In His name we overcome. For the Lord our God is able. God is with us. He will go before. He will never leave us. He will never leave us. God is for us. He has open arms. He will never fail us. He will never fail us. Lifted up, He defeated the grave, raised to life. Our God is able. In His name we overcome. For the Lord our God is able. Lifted up, He defeated the grave, raised to life. Our God is able. In His name we overcome. For the Lord our God is able. For the Lord our God is able. For the Lord our God is able. Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. And when I think that God His Son not sparing sent Him to die, I scarce can take it in, that on the cross my burden gladly bearing, He bled and died to take away my sin. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, where joy shall fill my heart, then I shall bow with humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
We're going to take a few moments and remember what Jesus has done for us. It's a time to reflect and recenter ourselves. It's time to be reminded that because of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, we can be forgiven. No matter what mistakes we've made, how we've struggled, God is for us. He wants us to be near to Him, and because of Jesus' sacrifice for us, we can draw so very close to God. If you have some bread and juice, you can go ahead and grab those. They help us remember that Jesus gave up His body and that His blood was spilled for us. I'll pray, and then we'll celebrate communion. Let's pray together. Jesus, thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for your amazing grace towards us. I pray in these moments that we would turn our attention towards you, that we would draw near to you. Pray that you'd help us be open to what you want to do in our hearts and in our lives. Jesus, we thank you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
You know, one of the ways we respond to God's love for us is by giving our tithes and offerings. We're always trying to become more and more generous because God's given so much and keeps giving so much for each of us. You can give right now by texting CCC Whitemarsh to 77977 or head over to communitycc.net and click the Giving tab. You know, last week we had our first outdoor service. It's at 10 o'clock for folks who are ready to meet in person. You can come on out, bring a mask, you can bring a chair if you want. And we'll continue streaming services at 9:15 and 11 on Sundays, 7 o'clock on Monday nights. Also, services are now available on demand through our website beginning every Sunday at 7 a.m. There are so many options to engage with the service so you can consistently be taking steps towards God.
Hey everybody, I'm David Robinson. Thanks for tuning in to CCC's online service. It's so important to stay connected to the church, seeking after the things of God, staying connected, which is what I want us to look at today. You know, for several weeks now, we've been in the series, What Now? I think I hear it practically every day. Somebody will say, this is a crazy time. I mean, there's so much tension and there's so much trouble and there are so many challenges to figure out and people are hurting and they're frustrated and they're even scared. You know, this is not a simple time. So what do we do? What now? Well, I want every person tuning in, I want you to keep going. I want you to stand firm, to not give up, to actually grow and thrive even during this year, 2020, and this month. I want you to know that you and God, surrounded by the church, can make it through anything. I believe you, when you're walking with God and you're surrounded by the church, you can make it. What now? Lean in relationally. You know, this is not a connected time for people. We've been isolated from each other. People are pushed apart and it's not healthy, it's not good. And we were made to experience life with each other, alongside of each other, together, which is something, especially now, we have to think through, we have to work at and be intentional with. Which brings me to the Bible and chapter 4 of the book of Colossians. If you have a Bible in one form or fashion, get to the 4th chapter of the book of Colossians, which is this letter to a young church in a place called Colossae in the 1st century. And it's written by the Apostle Paul, who writes this from a prison cell in Rome. And these will be some of the final words that he'll ever write. And the nature of what we'll look at here, well, we have a tendency to just skim over these kinds of verses because it's a list of a bunch of names. And when we come across this list of names, it's easy to blast through it if we don't know who these folks are and why they're important enough to be mentioned and recorded in the Bible. But they are. And it's a list of a group of people that the Apostle Paul had shared his life with. There's nothing in the world like being a part of a little band, a little group, a little community, sitting around a little circle, devoted together to the Lord and to His church. I mean, there's nothing in this world like that, where there's this rich community, sharing the experiences of life along the way with God at the center of it all. That can change your life. And people look for this all over the place. I mean, we try to find this everywhere. But your softball team or your book club, I don't know if we'd say, well, that changed my life. I'm not sure some of the places we strive for this is going to give us the level of camaraderie, the level of acceptance and encouragement and accountability and wisdom and perspective that we're going to find like we do when we link ourselves with people who are walking with God while they walk with us. There's nothing like that. To have known that in your life, you will have known deep intimacy. You will have had the grand adventure of thoroughly spending yourself to contribute to the greatest cause in the history of the world, which is the building of God's church, His kingdom. You will have been a part of a story bigger than yourself. To be a part of a circle like that, what's the greatest adventure you'll ever be on? And to miss being part of a little circle where you are intimately known and where you're devoted to the greatest of causes, you miss that and you'll have missed the reason why you were born. You may lead a comfortable life, a respectable life. It may even be what looks like a spiritual life, but you'll have missed the grand adventure for which God made you, which is why this business of community, of relationships, of life together, of little groups around little circles, it's right at the soul of Community Christian Church. It's why the intentionality of small groups, of meeting together regularly and rhythmically with other folks, a place to know and be known and love and be loved and serve and be served and celebrate and be celebrated. It's so very central because you are in a story bigger than yourself. And that's what lies behind Paul's words here at the end of Colossians, chapter 4. Again, for a lot of people, this is a part of the Bible that when they're reading through it, they just kind of skip right over a section like this. But it's so rich, and I want us to extract everything that we can from it. Because Paul is probably not far from the end of his life. He's in prison here. He's in Rome. And this is a real poignant deal. He's sending greetings to a little circle of folks. And Paul kind of pulls the curtain back. And here we have the privilege of seeing around this little circle, his small group of sorts. And there are a handful of names that get mentioned. And there's a story behind every one of those names. And so let's just take a little walk around this circle. Not all of these names here, but a few of these names. And I'll ask you to reflect, if somebody were writing about your little circle, and I sure hope you're a part of one. I hope you're a part of a little group, a small group. And if you're not, get in one. It's not too late. Be a part of a little community, because this is no solo gig we're a part of here at this church. But I'll ask you to reflect, if somebody was writing about your little circle, what would they write next to your name? What gift are you bringing? What's your dream? What story do you want to be remembered for? Think about that. All right, here we go. Paul starts in verse 7 here of chapter 4. Tychicus will tell you all the news about me. All right, so Tychicus is the first one to point out. And Paul here gives Tychicus a beautiful commendation. Look at the three phrases that describe him. He is a dear brother, a faithful minister, and fellow servant in the Lord. I'm sending him to you for the express purpose that you may know about our circumstances and that he may encourage your hearts. So Paul says he's a beloved brother. He's like family. And he's a faithful minister. Tychicus had some task to work at, and we don't know what it was, but he was diligent in his work for the community. And he was a fellow servant. He had a humble spirit. He served. Now I'll kind of give us a phrase for each one of the names around this little circle, and if you're taking notes, which I'm sure you are, Write down a little note next to each one of these names, or use your thumbs to furiously type it in. The one here for Tychicus is this word encourage in verse 8. I'm sending him for this very purpose, Paul says, so that you may know how we're doing and that he may encourage your hearts. Encouragement is so needed. I mean, you've never met anybody who doesn't need encouragement. Every single person on the planet needs encouragement, and we need it all the time. It's like every one of us is this big bucket, and there are holes in the bucket. Dear Liza, there are holes in our bucket. Dear Liza, some holes. And they're at the bottom of the bucket, and it's draining the courage right out of us. We need somebody to pour the courage back into us, to encourage us. That's why the Bible says, encourage each other daily in the book of Hebrews. Paul knew that Tychicus would be an encourager. Most likely, New Testament scholars think that Tychicus, who was from the province of Asia, was the representative that brought money from Asia to the poor in Jerusalem at that time. Most likely, Tychicus is the guy that signed up for that. Paul actually writes about him to the church at Ephesus in the book of Ephesians in the Bible. The 6th chapter says this. Paul writes, so that you may also know how and what I'm doing, Tychicus, which is the same guy here, will tell you everything. Here's how he describes him. He is a dear brother and a faithful minister in the Lord. I'm sending him to you for this very purpose, to let you know how we are and to encourage your hearts. A lot of you are encouragers. Now, some of you have the spiritual gift of encouragement, kind of an extra dose of that, an extra ability to encourage. And man, let me just say, release that gift all over the place. Let it fly. Just fan that into flame. Because folks who encourage, they just breathe life into their little circle. Encouragers, they keep people going when they would otherwise give up. And so never underestimate what a gift that is to your little circle, because without that, people get demotivated. Their spirit can kind of wither up. I've been to a lot of funerals lately, done some funerals, attended some funerals. I went to a funeral this past week, and it was the funeral of a guy by the name of Bob Green. He was 99 years old, and he was a longtime minister, a preacher, a pastor. And I met Bob when I was first starting out as a minister in my early 20s. Bob, I think he was in his 70s by that time, and he had ministered faithfully all around. Maybe 45 or 50 years by that time. And he was at the first funeral that I ever led, the first funeral I ever presided over. And I remember that very first funeral, I was nervous. I was really nervous. I had never done a funeral before. And I got up and I looked out at that group that had gathered there that day, and there was Bob sitting near the back. And I thought, why isn't Bob doing this funeral? Bob should be doing this funeral. He's done like 1 million funerals. He could do this without batting an eye. He could do this with his eyes closed. Why isn't Bob up here? Well, I kind of stumbled my way through that funeral. I don't remember much about it. But I do remember that Bob, who loved to encourage young ministers, he came up to me and he affirmed the job I did. Really complimented me. And more than that, he affirmed my calling that day. I'll never forget that. Keep at it. You got it. You can do this. You're right where you need to be. To have somebody at just the right time offer you the gift of encouragement, that's so crucial. And it's so needed. Well, that was Tychicus. In verse 10, Paul talks about somebody named Aristarchus. And there's just one phrase connected to him. My fellow prisoner, Paul says. Do you have someone who will stick with you no matter what? And how well do you do at sticking with somebody when they're in trouble? To stand right beside someone as they face what they're facing, that's supposed to be the church. And that's the story of Aristarchus. He was with Paul in Ephesus when there's a riot, and Paul and his companions, they were actually thrown into prison. And at one point, the Bible in the 27th chapter of Acts tells us that the prisoners, they were transferred, and Aristarchus is with Paul through that whole deal. He becomes a loyal travel companion and shared with Paul's trouble there. Some scholars think that Aristarchus attached himself to Paul as Paul's slave so that he'd be allowed by the Romans to stay close to Paul. And the key word here is loyalty. Part of that little circle Paul's telling us about. Loyalty. You know, a lot of times we do well when people are in short-term crisis. You know, for a week or two, we'll offer support for them. But what about when people are in long-term need, when people have financial problems that last, or career troubles, or an extended illness? And a lot of people kind of melt away. I mean, how do you do on the loyalty factor in your little circle? There's a saying in the Bible, in Proverbs, a piece of wisdom: a friend was born for times of adversity. And that was Aristarchus. Paul says, he's my fellow prisoner. He was in prison with Paul, almost certainly voluntarily. Then there's Mark. Paul says, my fellow prisoner Aristarchus sends you his greetings, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. You have received instructions about him. If he comes to you, welcome him. Now, this is interesting. If he comes to you, welcome him. And a little background on Mark, also known as John Mark. In the Bible, in Acts 13, we're told that he set out with Paul. Mark set out with Paul and Barnabas to go on what was known as a missionary journey with them. But we find out in Acts 13 that Mark quits. He deserted them. He got a little homesick. He missed his mama, whatever. Then there's this little dispute that arises between Barnabas and Paul. I mean, the next trip they take, Barnabas wants to take Mark again, but Paul says, no way. Paul says, he wimped out last time. I'm not taking him again. He blew it. He can't handle it. And so there's this, rather bitter dispute between Paul and Barnabas, and they separate. They go their separate ways. Barnabas, though, he kind of reclaims Mark. And over the years, Mark doesn't give up. He returns to God and returns to the ministry and proves himself to be faithful. It's a beautiful story how Mark, who Paul kind of gave up on, he comes back, which is the key word for Mark, come back. I mean, Mark failed and he knew it. And he may have had a reputation for being a failure. I mean, imagine if Paul had given up on you. How much fortitude would it take to persevere through that? But Mark did. And Paul himself realized how far Mark had come and what Mark had to offer now. Most likely, that's why Paul says to the Colossians, you have received instructions about him. If he comes to you, you welcome him. Probably there were still some people in the early church that knew about his failures and wanted to count him out. And so Paul says to the church, you've received your orders about Mark. People can come back. We serve the God of the second chance. So if Mark comes to you, you welcome him. Now hear me well, CCC. We serve the God of the second chance. This isn't a 3 strikes and you're out deal. Mark is actually called by God eventually to be one of the writers of the Bible. He writes the Gospel of Mark. It comes from him. What if he hadn't had the courage to come back? Maybe the story about you is you failed in some way. You tried to jump in, be involved, but it didn't work out. Or you had a relationship or even a marriage failure, or you lapsed in some sin of one sort or another, and you've kind of been feeling guilty. And you've responded by withdrawing from people and withdrawing from the church. Well, this little circle we're looking at includes the story of someone that got sidetracked, but then mended. Of dreams that got shattered, but then got rebuilt. So if you feel like you failed in some way, got sidetracked in some way, you remember Mark. Mark came back from that, and you can too. And if you know of somebody that's failed, just don't give up on them. You remember the story of Mark. Love the story of Mark. Another character Paul talks about is Luke. And just this phrase here about him, verse 14, Luke, the beloved physician. Some of you may know about Luke being a physician. It's the only time that he's called this in the Bible. And it's a beautiful name given to him, beloved physician. In our day, when you've been waiting in the waiting room of the doctor's office for 45 minutes, it's not often that you hear the phrase beloved physician. They don't come out and say to you, the beloved physician will see you now. In Paul's day, medicine was just emerging as its own discipline. And here's apparently what happened. Luke gave up a medical career to travel with Paul. You may sometimes hear about this kind of thing. Apparently, he felt God's leading him to leave the marketplace. Now, not everyone does that, and not everyone should, but Luke did. And I'll tell you an interesting theory. I mean, we don't know this for sure, but it may well be the case here. Paul talks in another letter about his thorn in the flesh. And we don't know what Paul's thorn in the flesh was. It may well have been a physical affliction. And it's very possible that the reason Luke has such a place in Paul's life and heart is that Luke decided to travel with Paul to give medical attention to whatever the affliction was in Paul's life so Paul could keep doing his thing. Again, we don't know that for sure, but it's very possible that that's what their relationship was. And the key word here for Luke is the word sacrifice. He made a sacrifice, a career sacrifice. He chose to travel with Paul. And Paul says, this is Luke, the beloved physician, gave up his whole career. Luke also went on to write one of the 4 accounts of Jesus' life. The Gospel of Luke is what it's called, as well as the book of Acts. I mean, anytime what you write makes it into the Bible, that's a big deal. Some of you in the coming weeks and months, maybe heading to the end of this year, maybe throughout 2021, next year, God's going to call. He's going to urge you to sacrifice. And maybe it's something big, and maybe you even know that right now. Your heart's kind of thumping. Are you going to respond? Are you going to say yes? I mean, maybe it's a smaller deal. Maybe it involves time devoted to serving, or it involves money. I mean, will you do it? Will you make a sacrifice? Luke sacrificed. And that's what he brought to the circle Paul's describing here. The next name is a real sad one. It's Demas, verse 14. Take a look at this short description here. Luke, the beloved physician, and Demas greet you. And if you read through this whole section, you'll notice Demas is the one name out of this entire part of the Bible that has no description surrounding it. But he's got a story too. In one letter that Paul writes, Demas is called my fellow worker. And there was a time when Demas was counted by Paul as a fellow worker. But here in Colossae, he's simply called Demas. In fact, the last mention of him is in 2 Timothy 4:10 in the Bible. And this is what Paul writes about him. For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Apparently, there was a kind of drift at work in his life. And that's the key word for this story, the word drift. There was a time when Demas stood shoulder to shoulder with Paul, but there was a pattern of drift in his life, and it went unchecked. And eventually, he just drifted out of that little circle and just drifted away. And we never hear of him again. And I got to tell you, some of you today might need to do a little heart check. Is the truth about you right now that there's a kind of drift factor in your life, and you find yourself consumed by any number of things, career or financial issues or levels of achievement or comfort or security or anxiety or sin, so that you're being pulled away, becoming detached from your little circle, from the church, from the things of God and the work of God. Today would be a good day to say, I just don't want to drift anymore, God. I'm done drifting. Tell somebody, tell the people in your life, tell the people in your little circle, in your little community about the state of your heart and what's going on there. Well, that's the story of Demas. One more. Again, there are a whole lot that we could deal with on this list, but one more for us today. Verse 12 tells us about Epaphras. Epaphras, who is one of you and a servant of Christ Jesus, sends greetings. He's been tireless in his prayers for you, praying that you'll stand firm, mature and confident in everything God wants you to do. Tireless in his prayers for you. What a great gift. Do you have a group of people who are tireless in their prayers for you? When my mom died back at the beginning of this year, I remember a friend called me and was sharing their condolences, and we talked for quite some time. He had lost both his parents just a couple years before. It was a tender conversation. And near the end of our conversation, he pointed something out that really, really stuck with me. He said, David, nobody prays for you like your parents. And that's true in most cases. It's true for me. I know my mom was tireless in prayer for me my whole life. And it's true for my kids. Nobody prays for them like me and my wife, Melanie. But I don't just want parents praying for me, and I don't just want me and Melanie to be the only ones praying for my kids. I want a whole group of people like Epaphras, a servant of Christ Jesus, who are praying as well, tirelessly praying for them. Do you have that in your life, in your circle? I mean, man, to have that is such a gift. And to not have that in your life, oh man. Think about Paul for a second. You know, the Apostle Paul wrote 13 letters in the New Testament, including the one we're looking at here today, Colossians. And a whole lot of folks, when they think of Paul, they think of him as a trailblazer, which he was. You know, he's a church planner, the take charge kind of guy. And there's this image of him just carving a path all by himself, all alone. But about every time we read of him in the Bible or about him in the Bible, he's always listed with somebody else. He always has this circle, this community. What if he didn't have a circle like he's describing? Would we have those 13 letters? Maybe not. What happens to Paul if he's not connected? I mean, if there's no tireless prayer from Epaphras, no sacrificial devotion from Luke, no unwavering loyalty from Aristarchus, no ongoing encouragement from Tychicus, what happens to Paul if he's not in a little circle? And what happens to you? I think of all the unnecessary loneliness, all the unnecessary discouragement, if we don't have a collection of folks we're walking with who are also walking with God. If somebody was writing about your little circle, what would they say about you? What's your story? What's your dream? Are you even in a little circle? I mean, if not, you're missing out. You really are. If you're a student, our student ministry small groups are kicking up. If you're watching this on Sunday, they're kicking up this evening, kind of taking over the place around here. Social distance style, of course. But if you're a student, middle school or high school, show up. Be a part of it. If you're in a circle already, in a small group of some sort, then thank God for them. Encourage them daily. Spur each other on. If you're not in a group like that, you can do something about it today. Just the click of a button, that's all it takes. You can go to the CCC website and jump in, virtual or otherwise. You can jump into a starter group or a rooted group, all kinds of groups, lots of opportunities to take steps in this direction. Don't miss out. One more picture for us, and then we'll wrap up. Gregory of Nyssa was one of the early church fathers in the 4th century, and he painted a beautiful picture of what we're talking about today. And this is what he writes. At horse races, the spectators, intent on victory, shout to their favorites in the contest. From the stands, they incite the rider to keener effort, urging the horses on while leaning forward and flailing the air with their outstretched hand instead of a whip. Which, by the way, Gregory seemed to spend a surprising amount of time at the track for an early church father, you know? Anyway, he takes this picture here and he says this, I seem to be doing the same thing myself, most valued friend and brother. While you are competing admirably in the divine race, straining constantly for the prize of the heavenly calling, I exhort, urge, and encourage you vigorously. I love that. I exhort, urge, and encourage you vigorously. Gregory says, I'm here. I'm watching my friend run the race, and I'm cheering them on. And this is your life. This is your race. You've only got this one race, and God is with you. So don't you stop. You keep running the race. And I want that for you. Our church wants that for you. And I believe CCC can be a place where you can discover this. Our church can be this for you. You know, it's going to take some effort, but there are so many folks who could describe how they found right here at CCC a circle similar to Paul's that exhorts, urges, and encourages them vigorously. What now? Lean in relationally. Connect. You can make it. It'll be beautiful when you link your life with people who are walking with God. Let's pray together. Father God, thank you for these examples we have before us to encourage us and inspire us. And I pray they do just that today. We have so many reasons we throw up to not take a step, not step into what you're calling us to. And Give us courage, Father, to move in the direction you want us to go. Thank you for the church. Help us be the church. Always be there for each other and help us stay together, especially during this time. We thank you. Especially thank you for Jesus and your love for us that's given to us through him. It's in his name we pray. Amen. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in today. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you right back here, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll see you, everybody. Somewhere, Justin Tucker is smiling.